Episode 14 with Scott Mellinger of the legendary metal band Zao. Do not adjust your dial. That was the song Xenophobe from the upcoming album by the band Zao. Be looking for that release in 2016. Before we get started in our interview with Scott, just want to talk a little bit about the ministry, Christmas in the Park 2015. It's happening out in Denver, Colorado, by my friend Jerry Herships of After Hours Ministry in Denver. He runs a bar church out there. What they're doing with Christmas in the Park is they're looking for donations of sleeping bags to help with the homeless out there. This is just a great way for you to be able to give back, give to somebody. This is basically like giving somebody a home. And I don't mean that in any condescending manner. These are 0-degree adult thin-insulated adjustable sleeping bags, and it's basically somebody's home for the winter. They're like $32, I think, on Walmart, and I'm going to put all the links up on the Facebook page and on neverforsakenpodcast.com. You just go to the link, you buy one of the sleeping bags, and there's an address that you can ship it to. It's real easy. Just you can take care of this from the comfort of your own home and really help somebody out and bless them this winter. We got Scott Mellinger as the guitar player for Zao. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you here, Scott. So, Scott, as we were talking off air a little bit, like I said, I was listening to you on another podcast and just hoping I'm not copying them too much. But I think the story that, a lot of things that you talk about weaving in and out of Christianity and Christian bands versus non-Christian bands and whatnot, I think it's something a lot of people need to hear. And one of the focuses of the podcast that I have is to kind of reach the disenfranchised or the de-churched or unchurched Christians, I suppose, of which I count myself, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later as well. So I guess I'd like to just start by asking you about your upbringing. I do understand you were brought up by religious parents, and if you could just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my parents, when I was very little, we did actually go to a Protestant church for a little while. And, as anything, it kind of grows a little strange for them. So they stopped going. They had some, I don't think falling out, but they had some differences in opinion. So they stopped going there. And then we didn't actually go to church after that anymore. My dad was, he was a really religious guy, like a really on fire type of born again Christian guy. And he, for some reason, fascinated himself with the end time prophecies and Jack Van Impe and all that kind of stuff. My mom she's not like a hellfire brimstone Christian, but she's definitely not in agreement with a lot of what, well, especially with how I am, but a lot of the secularization, she calls it, sort of, which is crazy to me because our country's always been secular.
Correct, right.
But a lot of Christians don't understand that. They think that it was founded as a Christian nation, and they think that they don't really read history and understand what our founding was. So they, so they weren't really it wasn't horribly pushy. But, when you're 10 years old and you see a guy talking about how, oh, Jesus, he's going to be back. And that's pretty frightening.
Right. So. Well, my upbringing was very similar. I grew up in a Baptist church with very similar what you're talking about your parents. Or, we could have been, it sounds like we almost could have been going to the same church. And so, I was raised in the church. And the same thing, you get into a lot of that end times prophecy kind of stuff, and it was real scary as a young person, preteen, teenager. It was kind of funny because at the time I was probably one of the only kids in the church listening to heavy metal, and other kids, their parents wouldn't let them listen to it, and I kind of was sneaking it, I suppose. And I would make copies of Black Sabbath and and Ozzy and Iron Maiden tapes, and
Yep.
I'd sell them to kids in the group. And then they did this. There was some video presentation. I forget exactly what it was called, but like Hell's Bells or something. And they would show you all the satanic themes that were in heavy metal. And boy, I tell you, that scared me to death.
Wow, man. Well, yeah, that's something that's actually interesting for me. My parents were never really never stopped me from listening to anything. So I remember buying the first metal tape I got was Peace Sells, But Who's Buying from Megadeth.
Right.
And I was never kind of they didn't like censor me or shelter me from that stuff. So I remember getting that tape and then, immediately buying Metallica's tapes, and I was kind of able to not have to be shunned from that stuff. I was able to really, really get into it. They didn't stop me from it, but I also I wasn't doing anything as a kid. I wasn't really doing anything that I think would make them question why I'm listening to this stuff. I got into it and I instantly wanted to play guitar. My grandfather was a guitar player, so
Right.
I think they saw that interest in me, like a musical interest in it. And then I was, about 11 or 12, I started taking guitar lessons, and they saw how interested I was. So I think they looked at that music. For me, it wasn't like some rebellious thing. I mean, well, it's rebellious for everybody, obviously, but for me, it was more like, hey, I'm interested in how this stuff works. I'm interested in actually making it myself or playing it myself. So I think they looked at it that way.
So how did you transition from playing music and being a fan and learning how to play guitar into the the music scene? Were you guys were in the bands in the local music scene?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm from New England, originally from Providence, and
Oh, okay.
so that's big. And I know you're from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So that whole Northeast, I think, had really, really good underground heavy metal and hardcore music scenes.
There's so much. Yeah, there's a ton of good stuff.
So how did you get into all of that?
Well, it's started with a bunch of our friends. I went to high school, and it was a pretty big high school, and we had mutual friends. I remember, I think the first time I ever actually played in a group of guys, we played Danzig Twist of Cain together.
Okay.
And we just mutual friends. Everybody liked this kind of punk metal, whatever you want to call it, and so we just joined together, kind of horribly, tried to play through Misfits covers, Metallica was a little bit out of our league, but I was sort of catching on a couple riffs, so we would try to play that. And it wasn't that far after that I met Russ, because Russ went to the same high school with me. We were in the same grade.
Okay.
And I remember playing, literally, we would be in his basement playing Metallica songs, because he started out as a drummer, went to guitar. Guy's multi-talented. He could play, pretty much do anything musically. But so we would play Metallica covers with each other, and we never really got into bands together. It was just me and him hanging out playing them. And then as our high school went on, I think that was probably 9th, 10th grade, and then I got into 11th grade and met a couple other people that were really wanting to do a band, because I think it was right at the time where bands like Converge were starting, Botch, Coalesce. There was this really cool underground scene that we saw, that we were, and I mean the local bands too, even I mentioned a band called Abnegation before. There was a band called Passover. These guys that played in our town, a band called Puritan, that was fantastic. These guys were doing it, so it was the first time you saw, I mean, I'm watching Metallica videos and they're playing in front of thousands of people. That's not attainable, but if I see a band playing in a VFW and there's even 20 people or whatever, that's way more attainable, and you get to talk to these kids. And it was really that's the thing I think I loved about the hardcore scene, because it wasn't really in Pennsylvania. I think this happened in New England too. We were one of the first places, the Northeast was one of the first places where punk and hardcore DIY shows were really they were accommodating to metal bands.
Right.
I remember playing shows with some of my first bands where you're in that DIY hardcore scene, and we were shunned because we were a metal band. But in Pennsylvania, that's what we did. And like New England, I mean, you had bands like Overcast and what else? Like Aftershock, all those bands, like metal bands were kind of able to play in the hardcore scene.
Yeah, I would say Providence was the same way. You know, we would go to, there was a local club there called Club Babyhead, and Babyhead would have all the hardcore and the punk and but also the metal bands too. And like you would read on those like the flyers, those do-it-yourself flyers.
Oh yeah.
And you'd see like this whatever band name. You don't even know what kind of music they play, but I mean shows were like $3,
yep.
you know, and $5 for like 10 bands, and so you just go and and I think that music scene really did support metal as well as the hardcore and the skinhead and punk type of stuff as well.
Yeah, there was never like a separation. I mean, in Pennsylvania, you could have like just a straight up punk band play. There were bands like what Anti-Flag before. I mean, now they're monstrously huge, but like Anti-Flag when they started out, it was okay to have bands like that and like bands I was in play together. Like it wasn't like an odd thing to have a totally, you know, different show. I mean, I was in a band, the first band that actually got any kind of recognition. I was in a band called Chapter, and then Creation is Crucifixion. And both of those, I mean, I've played shows with like C and Red and stuff. And there's certain sections of the country that were a little odd with that kind of matchup. And then some places, you know, like Arizona was a great place. There was that when Groundwork was coming up and stuff like that, like I don't even know what you would really call them. I mean, I get it was like a really heavy influenced punk rock, but maybe not metal. But then bands like Unbroken too in California were breaking and they were doing metal. And so it at first, like metal, that metal core crap that we get kind of pegged with, I mean, there are people that didn't want those two things to mix.
Right.
And I remember that pretty vividly. So
yeah, I don't know why that seems odd. But like with that local music scene, it like as a teenager I had not much understanding of it, and all you see was like what was on MTV, White Snake and all these, and you know, all the big arena bands, and I never even knew that it's like club band kind of thing even existed until my early 20s. And I had already left the church at that time and was kind of turned my back on it. I had gone in the army and whatnot. And so now I'm in this like local music scene, not playing, but just hanging out and clubbing, and ends up that's where I end up transitioning back into church, and kind of where I had that you know, born again experience, as they say. Okay. And so I got saved into this like really radical church that you know, kind of like you were saying about your father, it was along those lines. It was It was always preaching end times, complete like you know, sanctity, and you couldn't drink, no heavy metal and whatnot. You know, they even like had these campfire burnings with the kids, and they would have kids bring their action figures and Pokemon cards and stuff and burn this stuff because they said it was all evil.
Wow.
So anyway,
that's evil to burn it. I mean, that stuff's worth money now. What'd you do to those kids? Good job.
I know, it's crazy, and it was like anti everything. But you know, I kind of bought into that for a while. But here I'm listening to all this music, and you know, you come into church, and right away, as people get to know me, they're like, "Whoa, what are you listening to this music? You can't listen to that stuff. That's satanic. You got to get rid of it." And I'm thinking, what am I going to listen to? Because this. You know, I'm not going to listen to worship music. I mean, other than when I'm in church, and that's how I come in to find out like bands on Tooth and Nail and on Solid State, and I found Zao and Project 86 and some other Blind Side, some really other good bands. And then I'm going to use Zao as an example because I'm talking to you. You know, well, they're a Christian band, and then you start to hear things like, oh, they're not Christian anymore. And so that kind of brings me into my question of asking, like, when you joined the band, what was going on at the time as far as like, I know Dan's at that time identify as Christian and lyrics are Christian. So how does that all kind of fit into someone like yourself who, you know, you're not a Christian, let's say? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I joined the band pretty just open-minded. I wasn't like an anti-Christian. I wasn't I just didn't know, you know. I mean, realistically, I'm not much different now. Like I just never really bought in, but I never was like, oh, it's all crap, you know.
Right.
But Dan and Russ, I mean, those guys, I mean, even like Jesse, they weren't that type of judgmental, condemning type of Christian. So you get into that, it's a little more open arms. So it's not as like, it's not as pushy. Like you're not like pushed away, if you do certain things. I mean, cause I like me and Dan and Russ, like we bonded over like not Christian music.
Right. No, I can totally understand.
Yeah. So like, I never looked at those guys as completely, it's hard to explain. Like I never really felt like they were against anything that I was. But like I said, I at that time, I wasn't really against what they were too. Like I was kind of open-minded. I didn't necessarily understand or, I really wanted to play guitar. Like it wasn't like this thing where I was a staunch, like, militant. I'm not really a militant atheist now,
Sure.
but, I just wasn't opposed so much, and they weren't like opposed to me just being like, I don't know, so, and I think too, like those dudes probably saw, and I definitely know that in our town, I mean, they had run-ins with people like you're talking about, that because Dan screamed he was demon possessed. So, so like the church really didn't do themselves any favors with those guys. I mean, they were pretty condemning of what they did, and I think that maybe pulled them in a direction to question the church, not necessarily their faith, but just what the church did. And I think that Zao was this thing after, when Dan and Russ and all, like especially when Dan came in, because Dan's the prime mover of our ideas. I mean, he, with his lyrics, regardless of what anybody else does in the band, Dan's ideas are what gets portrayed, and that's fine with us because I'm on board with what Dan was saying then. I'm hugely on board with what Dan says now. Like I've always felt like Dan is definitely the prime motivator for what ideas are spread through our band because of his lyrics.
So, well, with the lyrics, like the song content being more a reflection of what Dan is feeling and Dan's going through. I'm assuming he's the main lyricist.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of his heart is coming out through the songs. And so even though while you may not particularly subscribe to what he's saying or speaking, it's still something that you can get behind.
Yeah, like he still was coming from a perspective of just reality. Like he was still coming from a perspective of a guy that's questioning too. I think that gets misinterpreted a lot, where like Christians supposedly have all the answers. Well, those guys never pretended like they did. They were asking as many questions as any atheist would have. I think that they had a faith at the time that maybe trumped a lot of what would have driven people away, but they were still questioning everything. It's a lot of our early lyrics. I mean, lyrics on Blood and Fire, like the To Think of You song, is about his brother passing away and some of the friends that his brother had committing suicide because they couldn't handle that. There's a lot of things that go on with loss in our band. I mean, Liberate has a lot of songs that, if we would have come out and if Dan would have said, hey, this is what this song's about, this is what this song's about, they wouldn't have just pulled the cover because Jesse's little pinup girl. They would have pulled the record. I mean, Dan's talking about some serious stuff.
Right.
And he always has. But he's always tried to do it in a context of his perspective and not being shocking for the sake of shocking, just being realistic, being honest, throwing ideas out,
Yeah, I totally understand that. I want to say, too, 20 years ago, it was different with the surface elements, too, of like tattoos, piercing, and all that. I think in the church, it was totally not accepted. Maybe in some places, bigger places like L.A. and New York and stuff, but really Christianity as a whole, 20 to 25 years ago, was not accepting of it. And I was very much I hate using the word outcast, but more of a misfit. I think I was more of a misfit in my church, that I went to this really like white suburban, uppity yuppie church, and I was tattooed, and not as heavily as I am now, but just being into this scene and everybody just giving me the stink eye, like, what are you doing? Like, this
Yeah.
is not Christian. And these labels come out on everything. And so now in the music scene, you say, you get that from some people in the area, that judgmental Christian type. And what about on the other end, Scott? Do you get that from the secular side of the scene as well, where you're not DC Talk, or you're not a preachy band, obviously, and but so you're getting you get flack from the Christian side, and what about from the secular side as well?
Well, I mean, you're earlier in our when that transition was happening, our reputation preceded us, so people would like to write about how Zao was like a Christian band, which in its original formation it definitely was. Like, those guys were seriously a ministry band. That's exactly what their purpose was. The music was like kind of secondary to that mission. And so you can't be mad or bummed out when people, number one, expect you to be that way. That's what they think that the band was. And then for any kind of secular band that we play with, or like anything, like even whatever, you can't blame them for thinking that's the way we are too. And hopefully people would be big enough to talk and like see where you're at. But yeah, I mean, we got flack. Dan always said it. Jesse said it too. We were a band that was not Christian enough for Christians, and definitely too Christian for non-Christians. Obviously a lot has changed now.
Yeah,
right. But we played with bands like Today Is the Day. But it was never like, I remember it being like standoffish. It was just like, probably just in the way we thought people thought of us, we might have been standoffish too. Like, these guys are going to hate our guts, so I don't even know if we should talk to them. We did befriend. We played a few shows with Niles. I don't really think they're that's not kind of their thing, but we befriended them enough to like, it wasn't awkward. And then a lot of we toured a lot with Dillinger's Escape Plan. I remember a few times them just talking to us about like, do you think this stuff? And then when you come out and go even as a Christian, and I don't know why Christians are afraid to do this, but nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
Like, you can have your faith, and that's the point of it. So
right.
You can believe something. Belief isn't the same thing as knowing something. And I think if Christians would at least be able to admit, like, yes, I believe it and I have faith in it, but that doesn't mean I know it. I think there would be a lot further discussion to have. But, they were cool with us. They opened they were very open. We became close friends. I just actually hung out with the guys in Unearthed last night. We played with them a ton. Those guys really, I don't think they weren't Christians, obviously. I hung out with the Woven War guys too, which was fantastic.
Oh wow!
But yeah, I don't remember being in anywhere that that we felt like awkward. We did play a show with Napalm Death, and it was really, really intimidating. But it wasn't because of anything other than their Napalm Death, and we're all huge fans. So it was
okay.
Yeah. I do remember before I joined the band, there's a band that actually all of us absolutely loved called His Hero Is Gone, and they picketed Zao shows when they came to town.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
And honestly, man, like I said, all power to them. They're picketing something that they were staunchly against. You cannot be upset or blame a band that they might not know you, but your reputation is what it is.
Yeah.
It just like any Christian out there, if there's a satanic band coming, you're gonna picket them. So they picketed Zao shows, and it's a bummer because all of us were big, like we liked His Heroes Gone.
Right,
really,
right.
I still do. So yeah, I mean, I didn't see it. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I think we got a lot more problems with playing with Christian like venues. Like I think a lot of people were a little bit more judgmental and weird about us because of what we look like, or if somebody smoked a cigarette, or if somebody swore in the back. That stuff was still kind of new to people. So I think a lot of Christian bands now, when they're out there, they do a lot more than we were allowed to do, or that people would let go. It I look back on it, man. It really was like I don't remember it when I got in the band. I don't remember it being too terrible on each end. Yeah, you got to deal with it. You got to deal with certain crap, whatever, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that you get more of the crap from the Christian end. Unfortunately, I don't know why that is. It's always been bothersome to me. And like Mark Solomon of Stavsakers has a book where he talks about that, and in their early days, and they were kind of on the forerunners of the whole Christian rock scene, Christian heavy metal scene, and so they played a lot of churches. Yeah, and the stories that he tells, it's like just getting totally bashed by pastors and youth leaders and whatnot, and that was part of what did it for me. Kind of coming through the years, I never gave up the music, and I think that my spirit was aligned with a lot of you guys in the lyrics. I mean, Zao's not lyrics that I don't put Zao on in my car when I'm just driving around. Zao's like, I got to lay down on the living room floor and soak it in and like read the words as I'm like, it's funny, but like Zao's a very contemplative band for me. And,
yeah, we
you know what I'm saying, right? It's not like
absolutely.
You're not going to hum along to your songs. It's but like it's stuff that gets me thinking and questioning things, and I think that music and art in general is what gets us to question things. Unfortunately, I think asking questions it's been lost in Christianity. I think it's coming back, but it seems that asking questions gets you in trouble.
Well, I think that this is I'm gonna try to word this in a way that doesn't come off like I'm bashing anything, but I do think that certain people, including myself, are very inquisitive and always searching. So you eventually get to a point where you ask enough questions to where you have to be honest with yourself and go, I can't believe this anymore. And I think that's like, there are certain Christians that are scared to death to ask too many questions and open themselves up to things that may possibly convince them that they could be wrong. Right. Okay.
No, I'm with you on that. I totally understand.
Yeah. But there are certain, and I think there are a lot of Christians that I think their faith is strong enough that no question that they would ever ask is going to, damage their faith, and more power to them. That nobody's, my whole purpose is this. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the Christian God. I don't believe in the Christian dogma. I don't buy into any religion at all, regardless of what it is. But I'm not someone that knows what's going on.
Right.
And I think that atheists, I guess, get that horrible thing thrown on them. Like, it's hard to explain to people. I'm in the negative. Like, it's not that I'm telling you there is no God. I'm telling you that you don't know there is one.
Sure.
And, so it's not, people get pegged and they always say, well, how can you prove there's nothing? I don't have to.
Right.
Like, that's the point. Like, it's not about me proving there's not. Like, I'm in my bedroom right now and I'm looking at my Gibson Les Paul. If my Gibson Les Paul's not there, I don't have to prove to you there's no Gibson Les Paul there. You're going to see that there's no Gibson Les Paul there.
Sure.
But you're not going to convince me that there's a Gibson Les Paul there when there's not one there.
Right.
And
no, I can understand totally. Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's that. I think that argument gets, and I don't know if it's a defense mechanism to circle the argument, but it's not an argument to just say I don't see anything, so I don't. The evidence is showing me there's nothing there. That's all.
Yeah, I think like I was dogmatic for so many years because of my surroundings and the church people and Christians around me kind of made me that way, even though the questions were constantly rampant in my head. And I went through I'm not going to call it a crisis. I think it was a good thing, but probably about a year or so ago, I have a really good atheist friend, and he asked me if, he said, hey, I got these books. I don't want to throw them away. Do you want them? And I was like, sure, I'll take them. And I was really doubting and struggling anyway. And so I read a few of these books, Dawkins and Hitchens and whatnot. And
some of those books are just, even as a Christian, I think people should read them.
I do too. You got to at least be aware.
Yeah.
And so I think that like I struggle with labels so much because people close to me will be like, well, what do you mean? Are you an atheist now? Are you agnostic? Like they have to put a label on me or else they're so confused. And I'm like, listen, I believe in God, but I can't accept a lot of what's been taught and done over the last 2,000 years. So I'm not ready to give it all up, I guess, but so that makes me a heretic, I suppose.
Well, and I think that's a good differentiation, because there's a big difference between being like a theist and a deist, right? Now, I'm not saying you're either one, but if you follow along with Christian theology and you accept that story is the right story, and you believe that there's a God that intervenes in the world, that sent us his son in, by extension himself to sacrifice to save all of us from our sin, that's a lot different, and that's a lot harder to buy than somebody that just says, I don't know, I'm not giving up on the fact that there might be a creator.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, evidence is what, to me, and I think most people that are like me would say that I'm going to go where the evidence takes me. And I know some Christians will argue that they have pretty hard evidence. I think if you did have hard evidence, we wouldn't have so many differences in opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's a ton of hard evidence. No, I mean, there's a lot of things that point to it.
There's circumstantial evidence, sure. There's and one of my favorite things I've ever heard about this issue, like Penn Jillette talks about this. He's like, and I think Penn Jillette does a great job as a person that like Christians can befriend as an atheist, because he doesn't present himself like me. I'm not defensive. I'm not argumentative. Most of my closest friends and people I love dearly are Christians, and I love the fact that they can believe that. I have no problem with that. But Penn Jillette says, like, if I can't share in it with you, that's my barrier for evidence. So I know people will go, oh, well, how do you share love with me? Well, I can share love with you because I know what it's like to love something.
Yeah.
Oh, but we don't see the air. Yeah, but I can obviously, we can prove that air's going in our lungs. There's ways to prove certain things. But if I can't share it with you completely, like you cannot share with me your belief. It just, you can't do that. There's no way to share with me your feelings about how you feel about what God is. We can talk about it, but there's no way to like really go, well, here it is. You can see it now. You just can't.
And then it's like, if I was presenting you this hard evidence and then you turned it down, I could understand that. But I don't really have it to present to you other than, say, experiences I've been through or whatnot. But that still isn't really.
Yeah, that's, like I said, it's not shareable. You can explain them to me, but I'll never be able to share in them. As I can share like a good salad with you, or I can share, I think that's, to me, that shouldn't like stop people or make people go, oh, there's the answer. Now I'm not a believer anymore. I'm just saying.
Right.
But if Christians would understand, like, yeah, you can't really explain to people, just like I can't totally explain to you my love for my wife, but you can identify with my love for my wife, because if you're married or if you have a girlfriend, you're going to have that same type of love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I said, I come from the point of like a holy heretic, and Chris, it's just like you said about the band.
That's a good term.
Yeah, like I'm not Christian enough for the Christians, and I'm not atheist enough for the atheists. I don't know, man. I'm stuck in the middle, but it's kind of the reason, like I said, I did the podcast, and like my days of arguing about God are over. I'm more concerned with.
I'm so with you there.
I'm concerned with how the church is treating people, and I'm trying to, I'm kind of going more that way. Like I've interviewed a homosexual Christian on here, and women's right activist in the church, and just kind of this whole 2,000 years or more of patriarchal system and oppression. Like I'm fighting against this oppression in the church, and for all quote unquote minority groups, I suppose. And so, that draws fire from Christians, and
which it shouldn't. Like that's something that's insane to me.
You're right.
I mean, if you're going to really claim Christianity, you should be like the biggest civil rights fighter there is. Like everybody's equal, like everybody's equal in God's eyes, right? So as a Christian, I would think that would be something people would be so easily to be behind. But people can interpret and use whatever they want against whatever they don't like.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, so I'm just going to hang with that holy heretic thing. Maybe that'll be my next podcast or something.
Yeah, hey, that's...
Not too late for me to start a band, maybe.
It's never too late. All of us are old. We're still doing it.
That's great. So, hey, just so to kind of end things on a lighter note,
sure.
Although now I know the answer to this question, but I didn't before this morning. What do you do for your daytime job? What do you do when you're not making music?
I actually work for a company called Cash and Culture. A couple of my friends started a company where they do pop culture, like retail business, where it's like a resale business. So we specialize in anything from your 80s childhood, be it toys, be it video games, be it movies, anything. And there's a good market for nostalgia right now. I think people like a lot of we grew up, it's crazy. So I'm 37. So all the stuff that I grew up with when I was a kid, I couldn't, if my parents couldn't afford it, I couldn't have it. And then you get into your 20s where you're like, well, we were starving artists, right? Because we're in a band. So I was like, I can go buy stuff. And now you kind of get stabilized, and I'm married. I have a daughter and, have a house and stuff. So it's like, now I'm at a time where I'm like, hey, I remember that cool Transformer thing I wanted when I was little. So I think there's a lot of people our age that are like, wow, I love this stuff. I can never get it. And there were a lot of people that were smart enough to keep it in good shape. So there's a really cool, scene, man. It's just like anything, everything's a scene. There's a cool scene where people collect and trade and do all this stuff. And it's really neat. And I'm really, really thankful to have friends that got into it, something I was interested in, and they brought me along. So
I heard that this morning, and I was like, wow, because that was me, total 80s toys.
Oh, I love them. Yeah.
And I went to the Army, and when I came home from the Army, everything was gone. And it was gone / I didn't care about it at that time. It was early 90s, and I was like, I don't need that whole box of G.I. Joes. Just throw it away, sell it at a yard sale. And I mean, my brother's your age, and I'm 43.
Okay.
And we had everything. It was like, man, if only I still did, I'd be in it.
Well, hey, let me be one to actually thank you for your service, man, because that's big time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
My dad was in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed in Japan for a while, and he would send me home. I was still stateside, but he would send home all the Japanese toys.
Wow.
Godzilla, Guy King.
Oh, and they're going to do a Godzilla King Kong mix in now because they did the Godzilla movie, and I know they're doing another Japanese Godzilla movie too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they're these were the I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. They're probably about 18 inches high.
Yeah, I think
or big, maybe 2 feet or something like that. But they were big toys.
Yeah, I remember those things. I think it was Toho was the company that made them. They're sick. They're amazing toys.
The whole box was Japanese writing and everything. It was, that was good stuff, man. I just I heard you talking about that this morning, and that kicked up some memories. That was pretty cool.
Oh, I know. You should do there's a bunch of different websites that dedicate their website to pictures of all that stuff, and it is just so much fun. Because I mean, regardless if you collect it or not, if you care about toys, it's still cool to see the stuff you probably got it in Christmas, and it'll bring up a memory of you opening it on Christmas Day. It's just so cool. Oh
yeah, definitely. Yeah, if I collect it, my obsessive personality will make me be broke.
Yeah, it happened to
me. So, I'd have to answer to my wife and why I spent the rent on, on Warriors and G.I. Joes and all that stuff would not be good. So.
Oh, I hear you.
That's great. So, hey, just to finish up with the get back to the band as far as when can we expect the album, and you guys going to be touring? Yeah, what kind of future plans do you have for that?
Well, the record is musically finished. Dan has a few songs to finish up. We're going to try to have. We're hoping really that we're going to have either a spring or possibly summer release for the record. We are a bunch of different options. We are talking to some labels. We still possibly might release it ourselves. We were able to do some really cool stuff, and the people that have supported us, it's like they'll never really, like, bands do it all the time. It drives me nuts. I'm a really, like, genuine guy, so I hate saying this, but the outpouring of help. We put up some 7-inches to sell. We have T-shirts that we sell through a website called Holy Mountain Printing. And all of that, the proceeds we make from all that stuff went into paying for our records so we can own it.
Oh, cool.
We've had too many times in the past where you sign to a label, they end up owning your publishing, they own your record. We're having a problem now. We wanted to release more vinyl, and we don't own the records. The labels that bought the labels we were on own the records. You can't get your record. So we were like, we're going to do everything we can to own this record.
That's cool. I've seen the shirts are great. I got to get one or two or three. But
yeah, that company's fantastic.
Yeah, the artwork is sick.
Yeah.
And so in other words, you're not going to be on a label. You guys be putting this out yourself, and that's like Project 86. I think did that with the last one. They did a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and you guys think about doing something like that, or you just kind of did it through the T-shirts and the vinyls?
Yeah, we always felt like I different strokes for different folks, right? Like for us, we just never wanted to put up a Kickstarter or like a GoFundMe because sometimes you can't guarantee a band's going to follow through, and if you can't follow through, you just disappointed all these people. We just felt that it was smarter for us as a business model to like offer things that you get, and then we can make money from the things that you already have. So you buy a shirt or a 7-inch, you have the thing that you're paying for, and then we can take those proceeds and put it towards the record instead of just asking for people to like fund it. And then we have tiers of things that we get to do. Like, we just felt a little more comfortable to actually offer a like something, like some sort of merchandise. So then you have something, and then hey, when the record's done, we'll have that for you too. And then whatever.
Yeah,
like,
that'd be great.
Yeah, we're just trying. Like as a band, we're trying to like. This isn't our job. Like we probably won't be able to tour like we've done in the past. We're going to definitely try to play as much as we possibly can because it's so much fun and we love to do it. But this is like almost like a secondary hobby, but it's like the most important hobby you could ever have because it's extremely important to us.
Right. Well, and it's important to a lot of people too. I mean, obviously the fans. Not to be like, fanboy kind of person, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's, you follow a band and it's just great to see what you guys are doing. And then when that band breaks up or they end it, you're kind of bummed. And everybody's got a life they got to live. We understand that, but it's like, artistry, man, it's just so important. And
yeah, you have to be creative and you can't expect things. So I think a lot of bands, like they might get bummed out because, oh, well, looks like we're not going to sell this much, or we went to a show and there's 50 people there. I guess we probably should stop. Well, are you going to write songs, or are you? Because if you're going to still write songs, then you might as well not throw away the one outlet you have for people to hear your songs.
Right.
That's. I mean, we're realistic. We understand what our band is. We're unbelievably honored that people care enough and still care. But I would be writing heavy songs, and I would be asking Dan to scream on them if we weren't going to put them out as a Zao record or not. I just enjoy it, so that's what we're like. That's our mindset. We just enjoy what we're doing, and we want to. If you're into it, awesome.
Oh, I'm definitely into it. Well, Scott, I thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, man. It was great speaking with you. You're the first musician that I've got a chance to talk to, and hopefully I can get in touch with a lot more and do some more interviews as well.
Cool.
And I think it was great, man. I just loved having you on the show and look forward to the new album.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we're as excited as people are to hear it too.
That's great. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude.
You have a good day. Take care.
You too.
Thanks.